Yeah, just do it. Like it's gonna be cringe and embarrassing for only a little bit, but then the more you do it, the more you will discover little like things about how only you can do that. And if I could be any sort of like example for someone who's discovered things quote unquote later in life, it's been so rewarding and interesting. Like if anything, it's not boring. So take that risk and just see what happens.
Welcome to the Funny in Failure podcast, a podcast that celebrates failure and shines the light on the emotional side of comedy, with yours truly, Michael Kahan.
Today's guest is deep, insightful, and incredibly light. Charlene has lived a wild and incredible life. I love her authenticity and her ability to follow her chosen path. It takes true courage to live a unique life, and I appreciate her thoughts, energy, wisdom, and integrity, especially holding these characteristics during challenges and struggles. It's rare and it's beautiful. Charlene has an incredibly fascinating story. There is no one quite like her. She also reiterates the importance of being unique and how it's the best way to be. Okay, she's great. This chat is great. Let's get into it. Charlene Kaye is a singer, songwriter, musician, comedian, and actor who releases music under the name Kaye. She has carved out a unique path in the entertainment industry, beginning with her time performing with TEAM STARKID, the viral internet sensation founded by her University of Michigan classmate, Emmy award-winning actor Darren Criss. Since then, she's released multiple albums and opened for Arctic Monkeys, Alt J, St. Vincent, and Metallica. Rolling Stone magazine gave Kaye's 2019 single Closer Than This 5 out of 5 stars and hailed her as a fully realized pop goddess. Charlene's short-form comedy on Instagram Reels and TikTok is a phenomenon in and of itself. Charlene's recent expansion into acting and comedy has attracted a larger following. She made a cameo as herself at Kendall Roy's birthday party on HBO's hit series Succession and played synthesizers for Coldplay on Saturday Night Live while dressed as an alien. Her upcoming role as punk rocker Jade Power in the movie Ron opposite comedy legend Margaret Cho further solidifies her ascent in the acting world. Also in exciting news, Charlene will be in Melbourne for the International Comedy Festival with her show Tiger Daughter, or How I Brought My Immigrant Mother Ultimate Shame. So if you're around, check her out. Links are in the episode notes. So as you can imagine, we dive deep and we cover a lot, and we chat about transitioning to comedy, performing, and a love of guitar, trolls, viral videos, courage, the magical formula to Taylor Swift songs, her new lease on life, listening to your gut, the reason guitar sales have increased, solo versus being in a band, plus plenty more. Before we get into this epic chat, in case you aren't aware, the videos are now available on YouTube under Michael Kahan. That's Kahan with a K, unless you're listening to it already. I'll still be posting snippets of these chats on Instagram under Funny and Failure, so check them out if you want to stay in the loop for upcoming episodes, or you want to ask a guest a question. I'd also love it if you would share the podcast or share your takeaways from the chat. It really motivates me, helps the podcast grow, and ensures I can lock in amazing guests like this one. And just as a final reminder, the podcast comes out at 3:30 Melbourne, Australian time, with the full video of the podcast to be released the following day. Okay, cool. Thank you. Let's get into it. I saw a news article that according to Billboard, that you are one of the reasons guitar sales have increased for women. How does that feel? That's pretty cool.
That was really crazy. I could never have imagined as a kid that I would have been a reason that other people are picking up guitars. And hilariously, it's partly because of those troll videos that I do at Guitar Center, which was truly only to amuse myself. And I really mean it when I say I don't go in there specifically to do that. I go in there if I have to buy something at Guitar Center. And it's always just been the funniest place in the world to me because to me, it just represents this microcosm of like bros. I don't know. Like it's just I think it is getting a lot better. Like I actually have seen some female employees there the last few times that I've been in there. But I just think it's so funny because that is where I would go after school when I wanted to play expensive guitars. I had a crappy Fender acoustic guitar, and which is funny because Fender sponsors me now. And back
Oh,
then, I was
nice.
like, I was just so. But that's what I did in my spare time. I would go to the strip mall in Arizona, and I would play Dave Matthews Band and like look over my shoulder to see if anybody was watching me. And it was such a like judgmental environment back then. I mean, I'm 38, so like back then it was, oh my gosh, it was 20 years ago. So I was 18 and it was very much like 2004, you know?
Yeah.
And so the climate was just different. It was just different. And so now that I'm older, I'm like, it feels a little bit like retribution for my younger self to like
Cool.
have played so much in between then and now and to like have gotten really good and be like, well, actually I'm not actually struggling anymore, but it's funny to imagine if I were and like what would happen. And people do come up to me and they're like, actually it's like this or like that. And if I play the Beatles wrong, then I get people that are like gatekeeping that and like it's
Really?
so interesting. And it's different in every guitar center in the country. So in New
Yeah.
York, I don't get very many people who come up to me in New York. But I was in Florida recently, and I was in Guitar Center in Florida, and this guy came up to me and immediately just started flirting with me and asked where I was from. And I said, I said, I'm American, but my parents are Chinese. And he was like, oh, I went to Vietnam once. It was very nice. So
Just falls. But it's like even if someone says like I'm from where are you from? I say Australia. Say New Zealand. Like,
yeah. Oh, I've been to New Zealand once. Yeah.
yeah.
So
Uh,
it's just this thing where I don't know. It felt like it's not the most important thing in the whole world, but honestly, now with this new administration in America that's erasing DEI practices and all that stuff, it feels like my own cheeky rebellion to be in there as representation of a woman of color who can play. And like, I don't know, like I'm just, I certainly upset people on the internet because they think that it's pick me behavior and um, they think that I'm like trapping men into embarrassing themselves. And I'm like, listen, they choose to say something, okay? I'm not like holding a gun to their head. But
uh,
the long story short to your question is that I have gotten comments that are like, this makes me want to pick up a guitar. I'm 50, it makes me want to pick up a guitar. I'm 60, it makes me want to pick up a guitar. I'm like,
cool.
that is the absolute best outcome that I could ever imagine for just being a menace.
Just being a menace. Okay, there's I written down like 20 points. There's a lot there. But how cool, like just, inspiring one person, you've inspired many people, but you've also made history in that regard. Like that's, I know you're a very humble human being, but that is still pretty cool. Just knowing that, like, I think it's a large thing, but like something that's so important to the world has improved or increased because of you. Like, I want to get your humble blinkers away. Like that is cool. Inspiring that 50-year-old person is cool, but like inspiring the masses for doing something that you love and you're good at, like that's the ultimate dream for many people.
Thanks, Michael. I really love playing guitar. It saved my life in so many ways. And if I can give that gift to somebody else, even if it's via trolling, I mean, it's a really cool thing. And I think as I get older, I want to be even more of an example to people who are not 25 anymore and like trying new things. And like that includes comedy at this juncture in my life. So not just for music, but yeah, for comedy, just trying new things, like not being ashamed of aging because it's a privilege to get older and it's a privilege to continue to be an artist and to be growing and exploring new avenues of expression.
Thank you. You're now officially a co-host. You've said everything that we need to hear on this podcast. That was brilliant.
Okay, bye.
Yeah, thanks so much. It was lovely meeting you. I'll get into the comedy bit, but I want to go back to the trolls because you've seemed to embrace this. Like I know there was a Bobby Lee video that you've done. I'd love to know about that because just as a short like preface, that you could be, and you probably are, and you have every right to be offended and be so annoyed, but you actually like put it back on the trolls and embraced it and succeeded. That's so cool. Tell me about it.
Oh my, well, I just think that it is so funny. I don't I don't think okay, here's the thing. I'm not offended when someone says you look like so and so, and sadly I'm a little bit numb to it. Just being an Asian person in America is very common. The type of racism that I have experienced as an Asian woman has been sexual racism. So like intimacy and like fetishization, like behind closed doors. That is the type of like really harmful, violent racism that I have experienced. But if it's out on the street, if someone's like, you look like Bruce Lee or Sandra, oh, actually, I am surprised that I don't get more people besides Bobby Lee. It's very, very consistent. Every single day, it's like 5 comments that are like, Bobby Lee with tits, Timu Bobby Lee. Is that Bobby Lee in drag? And
I
I was
can't
on
see
this
the
other,
Bobby Lee. I can't see the others, but the Bobby Lee thing, I cannot see. That's why it like
well,
blows my mind. You get it that much.
somebody said on a podcast that I was just on, it's not that you, they were like, okay, I don't know if this is going to make any sense, but they said, you look like Bobby Lee in the same way that Meryl Streep looks like Future, the rapper, meaning you have similar features, which doesn't make sense because I mean, Future is black and Meryl is
Yeah,
white.
that.
But they were like, it's just something that like your eyebrows do when you guys get excited. And I was like, okay, sure. I mean, whatever you want to think, because the great thing about being an artist and being a comedian is that I can just put it right back into the work. And anything that
Exactly.
happens to me, I have this tool where I can make fun of myself and make fun of this stupid world that we live in. And it can be generative. It doesn't have to be something that gets me down. And I
It
like
looks like it
out of
inspires you.
everything.
Like when I've seen,
Yeah.
it looks like you're empowered. Like it's not out of like from more negative. Perhaps the comments might be just a negative, but you seem to
Yeah.
embrace it in a light way. It's like you're transmuting it, and that's what's awesome.
It is truly funny to me. The comments are there, it's pure comedy.
Yeah.
It's just like, I mean, I don't know if you saw this, but I grow out my armpit hair. And I have all these trolls that responded to the armpit hair like, do you even know what hygiene is? Don't and like this one guy was like, I went to Cornell and I have to say that
To
bacteria
Cornell.
gets trapped in your hairs that way. So you should really think about shaving it. And I was like, oh well, if you went to Cornell, like
The fact that a person said I went to Cornell, like do you reckon like when they order like a latte from like Starbucks, I
yeah,
went to Cornell anyway.
I hope
Yeah.
that guy does that for
Yeah.
sure.
No, he does. Like we know this for a fact.
Yeah, yeah.
Oh, yeah. How okay. So what was the actual reason? So you've done like the Bobby Lee video. I then want to like talk about like you've done like Taylor Swift video. Was it just purely for like your amusement and this is funny and I can bring joy? Was there a yeah.
I'm sure that other artists might have different perspectives on this, but comedy for me is truly, if I don't find it interesting and if I'm not laughing at it, then I don't think anyone else is going to.
Yeah.
And because I've been a musician for my entire life, all through my 20s, I was a touring musician. I did my music, I played in other people's bands, and I was trained in classical piano. I play guitar also because I do my own music, and I'm also in this all-girl Guns N' Roses cover band called Guns N' Hoses, in which I play Slash, which unintentionally taught me a lot of the technicalities of metal guitar in a way that
Oh,
I wasn't
nice.
expecting to. And so when I listen to music, it's very hard for me not to be listening to it academically. And I'm always noticing patterns and chord progressions. And I'm always like, oh, this happens over and over again. That happens over and over again. And with Taylor's music, I love Taylor Swift and I've been listening to her for almost my whole life. And so I was listening to her most recent album and I was like, this album more than other albums has one particular chord progression which is C, F, A minor, G. And I know that that's like the majority of pop music, but it's just the particular way in which her melodies are organized over it. And like the dynamics of how the bridge is always like really fast and like leading back to the chorus in this very like anthemic way. I was like, I think I understand how
You mastered it.
how this works. And so when I was taking a walk in the park and I was listening to her new album and I was like, I'm just gonna try to put this out in a way that is instructional for me and like in a way that like gets my observations out.
Yeah.
So I did that and then put it only on my close friends story because I was like, I don't want to be mean-spirited. It wasn't mean-spirited, but I was like, I just don't want like people to think I'm making fun of anybody, blah, blah, blah.
Yeah,
And then
those
I had another,
Swifties.
yeah, I was very afraid of the Swifties. Like
Yeah.
I was afraid. And so I didn't put it out. And then my friend Jess, who's another comedian, was like, this is really good. And if the reason that you're not putting it out is because you're afraid of what other people think, then that's not a good enough reason. And I was like, just call me out on my bullshit.
I love
So
that. That's a good friend.
so I posted it. It is a good friend, yeah, and I really look up to them as a comedian. And so I was like, you know what? Okay, fine. So I posted it and I was like, I love Taylor, don't hate me, Swifties. And it went like crazy viral. And it was just it was probably the first thing. It was the first viral video I ever did. Actually, the Guitar Center thing went viral on TikTok, but not on Instagram.
Yeah.
But this was something where I was like, oh, I can do this a lot because I have these thoughts anyway for every artist that I listen to. And every artist has their tropes, including me.
Yep.
So, you know, I have been doing it for what I call the main pop girlies, which is Dua Lipa, Chappell Roan, Charlie XCX, Sabrina Carpenter. And it's been fun to do it live too, because people really understand those references if they're a fan of that person. So
Yeah.
it feels like a big inside joke for music lovers. And that's
Oh,
what I love
nice.
about it.
So were you doing the comedy videos before, or was Taylor Swift
That was the first one. Yeah, that was and I realized that I had that kind of like musical understanding of that comedic understanding of like music
Yeah.
because I have the sensibility to articulate what I find funny and interesting. And also I have this whole understanding of how music works technically. So it's been fun to take those two buckets of knowledge that I've accumulated over the years and then put it into something that other people will find instructional and entertaining.
I love that. It's also so crazy that your friend, even though you did the work, but your friend has changed your life in the sense of giving you
Yeah,
the
for
courage.
real. Yeah.
There could have been a reality where you didn't post this video, it didn't go viral, and maybe you didn't do comedy, or maybe it would have come about another way. But do you ever think about it like that? Because that
Oh
is
yeah.
crazy. Yeah.
I know. I'm hanging out with them tomorrow night and I'm like, you know, you changed my life. Like it's it's really special. Their name is Jess Tom. You should look into them too. They're a really, really great comic.
Write that down.
New York based.
How do you spell Tom? Tom?
Yep. JESTOM.
Oh, and
Cool.
cool. Yeah, I want to go back to that because I think this is like the universe working for you. Also, I've already introduced you off air, but you know, you're a rock star. You've been in all these bands, and then to not switch because you're still doing that as well, but then, you know, lean into the comedy side and, you know, do this Taylor Swift thing, and then like your life changes. What did you notice like at that moment? Forget about like going viral. Were you like, oh, okay, this is something I can do. This is really exciting. Like what was going through your mind, if you can remember?
Yeah, it was something that I'm like, oh, this is something that I can do. And more importantly, it's something that I really enjoy doing. Every time I do an artist, I spend so much time with them and I listen to their whole catalog. I watch all of their music videos. I watch all of their interviews because something that's fun is not just analyzing the musical breakdown of it, but it's doing these pop culture references. Like I just did an Oasis one. And part of that was like watching all of the insane videos that Liam and Noel have done over the years, you know, revisiting this like iconic Top of the Pops performance they did where they switched places because you're not allowed to amplify instruments on this show. So people
Oh,
knew that it was actually they were lip syncing. It was like Liam who was miming guitar and he didn't know how to play, so he was just doing that. And then it's Noel singing Liam's parts at the beginning
that's
of that
wild.
song. Are you an Oasis fan?
No, but I've just heard
Oh.
stories about those two, and I get the names mixed up. But how one is no, I like it, but I wouldn't say like I'm a huge fan. But like how crazy they are, and just like social situations, they're like
Oh
mental.
man,
Yeah,
it's so unhinged, especially their Twitter. Liam's Twitter is a treasure trove. It's a treasure
I
trove.
will check that out as well. I love like crazy tweets
Let me
or
just buzz this person in. Okay, I took special care not to say sorry when I did that.
right. Yeah, they look. I mean, I forget their names, but they just sound like, as you said, so unhinged. I'll check the Twitter, and I'm sure everyone will as well. It's just crazy. So going back from the Taylor Swift side, because you've been doing this for quite some time, which is
Hmm.
crazy and good for you. Social media would have come in like later into the picture. Like, was it wild, like seeing the journey? Because, when you're first coming out of, you moved to New York and you've been in various bands, and I'm sure social media wasn't as popular. And now in the last few years, it can like make or break a career as well.
I know I never could have imagined that because I never was the type of artist who was like, I need to do this dance on TikTok or like do this trendy thing because it just never felt authentic to me. And so when I started to do the song breakdowns, I was like, oh, like this is something that I can do that no one else can do. And it was just it's fun for me. Like I really enjoy approaching it like a puzzle, like how do I reference all these things and make it like camp and fun and also make it instructional. And I think that comedy is math in a way. There's a setup, there's a punchline, like there are elements to
Formula.
it that make it work and make it hit in the way that you want it to. And that's been really fun for me to explore also.
That's so cool. And has it given you kind of a new lease on life? Because it's not possible, given your career, to, stay inspired the whole time. And I've got a few quotes from you, which we'll bring in. But has it given you a new lease on music as well and also life?
Absolutely. I was telling someone that in my 20s, I was doing something very similar to what I'm doing now, which is like going around to all these open mics and meeting people and just like being so invigorated by the community, like playing shitty gigs at places and just like wanting to be in communion with the art and the work and like also meeting people who are on the same path. So I loved doing that in my 20s and it led to more and more opportunities. It led to me touring a lot and like not doing a lot of my work in the city, but New York is so wonderful for that. It's such like a fertile ground for artists to find each other and to collaborate. I was in this band called San Fermin for many years, which opened so many doors for me and I love them dearly. We're actually doing a reunion show together in May in New York,
Ooh.
which I'm really looking forward to. And I gotta say, like, I have had a bit of an up and down relationship with my own music just because it's so expensive to make. The music videos that I've made with my sister, I'm very proud of, and they cost a lot to make. And every album, I'm like, why am I doing this? Why am I spending so much money and time on something that's not going to give back to me in any sort of like tangible way? And I have to keep on continually redefining my definition of success because there have been so many times in music where I've almost given up and I've felt so down on myself for not achieving the type of like quote unquote commercial success that my heroes had attained. And like back then, it was like St. Vincent and Mitski and like, indie rock artists that I loved and looked up to and whose careers I really admired and whose artistry I really admired. And that just didn't happen for me in the way that I thought it would, but it's better now. Like, I don't really want to be an indie rock icon in that way. And I want to do the work that I want to do. And comedy has just been such a wonderful gift and an unexpected surprise in this point in my life. And um, now that I'm in my 30s and like I'm kind of doing the same thing that I was in my 20s, where I'm going to open mics all the time. I'm hopping on other people's shows. I'm meeting people constantly. I'm like hopping on podcasts of comedians that I deeply love and admire. Like
Cool.
last week I was on, do you know John Marco Ceresi? He's a New York comic who I adore. So I was on his podcast and have been able to open for him a couple times, and it's hard sometimes
Cool.
not to feel imposter syndrome with like, oh,
Yeah.
I've only been doing this for a couple years, but I also have this whole wealth of experience before that has set me up to the point where I feel comfortable in front of a crowd. I feel like I can riff, I can talk to people. I don't feel like it's totally cold. I don't feel like I'm totally a novice in this. And I can do something that no one else can do, which is tell jokes with music. So I'm only looking forward to developing that and just seeing where it goes.
It's such a, you have one of the most interesting arcs. Like we'd have to speak for 400 hours to like get it all out. But it's okay. You said so much that I really like that you've talked about, changing your view of success. I've had a couple of artists and, they said that the main goal was to get commercial, not representation, what's the word? Label. And it didn't work
Hmm.
out for the one that I'm thinking of. And they thought as well that they were a failure, but their songs brought them joy. They were still able to perform. They still had, fan base. They were still able to do all this stuff. But there's a view that you are only successful if you've got that. But we hear so many horror stories as well of like certain labels and how they can control you and how you can't do your own music and how you kind of like owned. And I guess it depends on the label, but all of these things that we might think we need. But then when you realize you go down your own path, you're actually happier doing what you love. So I'd love to know a little bit about, the kind of that like mentality and why you've changed your view of success.
Yeah. Thank you for these extremely thoughtful questions. It's such a relief, and it's fun for me to talk about if you've done your research in this way, which is so cool.
Yep.
Yeah,
Thanks.
I feel really grateful. I do feel like I have a new lease on life for sure. I never could have imagined that all these doors could have opened for me with comedy, and I have gotten really close with this group called Two Tree Hill. Great band name. They are musical comedians that live in New York also, and they do musical comedy in a way that has really inspired and influenced my work also. My friend Ryan, who is one of the dudes in Two Tree Hill, we collaborate a lot. We are constantly like thinking of sketches and like sending each other ideas. I play in their band, and through them, I've met so many other folks in the New York scene who continue to inspire me. I mean, I I'm I'm still kind of in awe that I'm able to be in community with some of the greatest working comedians, and that I could it's casual for me to like be on a bill with someone like Jay Jordan, who is such an established comic and has been on the Tonight Show so many times.
Yeah.
So but I have to say, and this probably leads into Tiger Daughter, which I'm not sure if you, is it okay if I start
Yeah,
to talk
yeah,
about
yeah.
this?
This
Okay.
is, yeah.
Well, the whole portal to my getting into comedy was this show that I wrote about my mom called Tiger Daughter, or How I Brought My Immigrant Mother Ultimate Shame. And
Hilarious name.
thank you, and I started to write what I thought was going to be a book about our experience together. I would write conversations that we had, conflict that we had, experiences growing up with a very intense Asian mother. And it was only until I was in acting school during the pandemic, I decided to take like a Zoom acting class because I was like, you know what? We're just inside, there's nothing else happening. And I've always been curious about what it might look like to express myself in this way
Can I
because I'd
just add
only
to that?
done, of course.
I won't say the yes, but I think that's really cool. During the pandemic, there's a lot going on. We won't get into that side. But trying something new, you could be like, no, I don't want to do it, and you did it, and yeah, continue with the rest of your things. I think that's really cool.
Thank you. My sister, who is a filmmaker, had this book lying around, which was by Bill Esper, and it was about his teaching the Meisner technique. And she was just reading it because she wanted to study up on how to coach actors better in her work. And I picked it up and I was like, this is interesting. And I started to read it and I was so captivated by it. And it was about this very influential teacher, Bill Esper, and it was like this person who had studied with him and was telling who was like narrating what the class was like. And I was fascinated by the different kind of alchemy that acting is. It's not like music where it's so autobiographical and you're telling a story about your experience and your pain. It's empathy in a totally different way because you're channeling your entire person
Yeah.
to and your empathetic skills to create behavior And then in that way, you become a walking work of art. And you start to, like, when you're watching it, when you're seeing good acting, you're seeing something being lived out in real time. It's the illusion of it being lived out in real time.
Yeah.
And at least that's the type of work that I like to see, because it feels real, it feels authentic, it feels like moment to moment.
You're speaking my language.
And so when things opened back up again after the pandemic, I went to the Bill Esper studio in Midtown, and I continued my work there in person with my teacher there, who ended up directing Tiger Daughter.
That's so nice.
So she was a hugely influential person in my life. And when I was in class with her, I was approached by one of my classmates, and they were like, I am putting together this night of works in progress. Would you be interested in like showcasing anything that you're working on? And I was like, well, I kind of have this thing about my mom, but it's like not really ready. It's sort of undercooked. And she was like, just bring it. Like, don't worry about it being perfect.
Nice.
So I put together this like slideshow, and it would have all these like text messages that we'd exchanged. And just by nature of our relationship, it was very funny. So it felt like stand up, even though it wasn't pure stand up, like me standing there with a mic. It was a whole narrative about our relationship, and it has like a rising action and a falling action and stuff. And after I did it, I was like, oh, I think that this has its own life. It feels very true to what I can do. And just the response was really great. And so I've been working on it for 2 years, and it's changed a lot since the first time I'd done it, but the soul of the work is the same. And that is what prompted me to explore what it could be like to have more short form comedy. When I pop on a set and do 10 minutes, what does that look like? Because I can't tell a whole story about my mom in 10 minutes. Like that's its own thing. So it's funny because like some comics are like, oh, I can't wait to see your hour. I can't wait to see your hour. And it's not an hour. It's like, it's different than that, because every comedian's different. But when they say your hour, what I imagine is an hour's worth of jokes that they have meticulously honed over the course of touring for years. Like that's what Anthony Jeselnik does. That's what so many comics do. And the vein of storytelling that I see myself in is more like a Mike Birabiglia or like a Hassan Minaj, or someone who like has a very particular story. It's vulnerable. There's family dynamics involved. It's very personal. So I'm not a one-liner comic as much as I would like to be. It's autobiographical, and that very much comes from my background in music.
I like both, but especially, with your style, it kind of reminds me a little bit of, I know Caitlin Cook. I don't know if you know her. I had her on recently. She's in New York. She does musical comedy, and Ricky Lindholm's, leading into that as well.
I love her so much. Yeah.
We had both of them on quite recently. And I love that style of like storytelling. There's humor, but also, revealing, your authenticity, being vulnerable, but it's in like a safe place where everyone can laugh, not where we're like, holy crap, what's going on there? I think it's amazing. And I've heard you speak about it a fair bit. And I also, I'll stop giving too many compliments. I think it's amazing, going from, your journey, you've been doing, you've been in the music space for like a while, and then, leaning into comedy, and then I'm throwing a lot at you. Then you have another great teacher who's like, this is great. Come and bring this out at our workshop or whatever it was. And then that also changes your life where you work on this and you go another area. It sounds like you've been able to like pivot and come back. And when things haven't been going as amazing, you've been able to switch and try different things, because you wouldn't have been able to thrive as long as you without being able to, tap into different areas and different things as well.
Yeah, it feels that I met the people that I was supposed to meet at the right time.
Okay, I love that. You're tapped into the universe. So while you're talking about this show, when you were speaking about your mother, and we won't go too much into it because I want people to see the shows, and you're touring around in New York as well, but also Melbourne. You're here for a month during the comedy festival, so people check it out. And the episodes, people can check it out in the episode notes below. But did you realize you had comedy gold with your mother at the time, or was it more just like analyzing your relationship?
Well, I mean, she has so many naturally comedic things about her. Like, she makes me Photoshop her face into pictures of Chinese empresses.
That's so good.
She once asked if I would record and produce her own album where
But
she
she can
covers
sing.
my songs. So it's stuff like that where I'm like, you can't make this shit up. Like, it's so funny, and she doesn't see it as funny, which is even funnier.
Yeah, agreed. Does she have awareness like around like why you find it funny and why people are
I don't
responding
think
so
so.
well?
I don't think so. I think she goes, what? I think this is perfectly normal to record an album and recording your daughter's songs,
Well,
which
she
I love for
obviously
her.
writes the
Like,
songs, yeah.
I will do it for her. And it was a fun time, like doing that album together. But I I just know that there's no one on this earth like her.
Yeah.
And she's hilarious, and it's also painful. Like, there's it's I think the reason that it's funny is because there's this pain juxtaposing it, which is that I am never going to get the type of approval from her that I want. And it's been a journey for me to learn how to let that go and find that within myself. And the more that I do the show, the more I talk to people. And you don't need to be Asian to have an understanding of the show. Like, I have friends that are like, I have people that come to the show that are like, I'm Greek, and like my mother wanted me to be a dentist and I wanted to be a clown. Like, it's like we're never going to be exactly what our parents thought we were going to, and that's a good thing.
Mm.
But in the moment when, especially when you're an immigrant and you're coming from a country of extreme scarcity and you've experienced famine and war, and then you bring your kid to America and she's like, Mom, I just want to swear in my songs. And she's just like, what the fuck are you talking about? Like, you think you have problems? And so it's a fundamental misunderstanding that we'll always have. And it's just this unending, unsolvable relationship that is both beautiful and so maddening.
I
And
can only
I'm trying not to provide a solution with the show or a clear resolution, but just like you know, it's this impossibility of wanting to be understood and wanting to understand someone else. And maybe you don't need to do that in order to love them.
it's the old age question. It's like what came first, the chicken or the egg? Because I don't think like I have a good relationship with my parents, but I resonate strongly. You know, they immigrated from South Africa to Australia, so I'm the firstborn here. So I don't think they
Oh,
wanted me to be doing, you know, screenwriting and podcasts, but they've been extremely supportive. So I can,
oh,
yeah,
must be nice. I'm just kidding. I'm happy for you.
we all have. Anyway, what I was saying, I don't think it's possible. It's just there's like some law where parents will never fully understand us. It doesn't matter how much you explain, get the diagrams, show all the SMSs. Parents can't get there. And I'm very grateful that I have a very good relationship, but I don't know anyone on the planet where the parents are totally in sync. Like it just, I don't know why. Like there's a different consciousness, and also credit to your mum as well for getting you to a stage where you believed in yourself, where you could pursue this, because it wouldn't have been easy for you to. And I know that's a whole journey in itself. There's no way it would have been easy given, you know, your upbringing to, you know, just decide to do music
Oh, yeah.
yeah,
Yeah. Or be an artist of any kind.
yeah, being it, that's probably a better way of saying it. So the courage for you to do it is also a credit to her, but also having the courage not only to pursue the career, but then also to talk about your mum, because there's obviously so many layers and you talk about on the show as well. But that also comes from like a confidence and like there's courage there because you also don't want to, you know, embarrass your mum or like speak badly of her. But at the same time, you want to live an authentic path to yourself. So what was like, you know, you did that workshop with that lady. What made you actually go, you know what, I'm going to tour this. I'm going to show this show. There's a lot here. What was kind of like the thing that compelled you to do it?
I just knew that I had a life outside of what it was, and I'm still exploring what the ultimate vision of that is, whether that be a Netflix streaming special or maybe it's like an off Broadway or Broadway thing.
Cool.
Or maybe it's just what it is. I did the whole show at Fringe this past year, and I'm going to be doing it in Melbourne coming up. And it's just so gratifying to do because I feel like it tells my story in addition to hers. It goes through all the different bands that I've been in addition, and in a way, like I think for the people who have been following me for a while, it's interesting because it it's sort of like my music career, but through her point of view.
Yeah.
And like to me, I'm doing these like sick shows with my Guns N' Roses cover band, but in her eyes, it's like, why is she showing her ass? And like, what is Welcome to the Jungle? And like, there's just no way to translate that into her point of view. So, yeah, I don't know. I think that after having seen a lot of shows too, I feel that it's special and unique, and it's a joy to share it with other folks who have had similar experiences. So that connection and that mutual understanding of like pain and laughter and vulnerability is why art is so important to me in the first place.
I love that you live a very authentic life as well. And I would imagine that it's very healing for you, going, over the years to like put pen to paper. You would have realized a lot within yourself as well. What have been your secrets to, being able to, grow and evolve not only as an artist, but as a human? Like, what are you doing? Are you like meditating every day in the Himalayan mountains? Like, give me the secrets.
Oh my gosh, I'm not a great meditator, but I do have a spiritual practice, and there are a couple of writers who I continually go back to. One of them is this wonderful writer named Martha Beck, and she has a book called The Way of Integrity, which I feel was very formative in my wanting and practicing being an embodied person. And what that means is listening to my intuition, listening to the signs that my anxiety gives me if I'm going the wrong way. I learned a lot about that from her. I love the writer Elizabeth Gilbert.
Yes.
Pretty much everything that she says resonates with me about being an unconventional woman and being an example of someone who has always followed her own path despite what society has wanted for her, including foregoing having kids and being married and like doing things that might not be as expected of someone living under patriarchy. So I really love her and respect her. And then there's this writer called Heather Haverleski who has a column called Ask Polly. And I have come back to her writing so much in times of need and in times of confusion. She has the style of a poet, but she has this grit and this sort of like crass vulgarity also that somehow balances the beautiful, intricate language that I find so powerful. And those three women have this feminist perspective and this wildness about them that I always want to carry on and like embody as well.
I love that. I love when one like lives their path. Intuition's my favorite topic on the planet. I had this lady on the podcast. I don't know if you're familiar with her book, but her name's Bronnie Ware, and she has written a book, The Top Regrets of the Dying. And I brought it up
What
so
is her
much
name?
time. So say that again.
Bonnie Ware?
Bronnie Ware, the top
Ronnie Ware?
top regrets of the dying. I'm just trying to find the book. Can't see it at the
I
moment.
just wrote that down.
And long story short, like she's amazing. I also had her on the podcast. I don't know how I got her on, but she's a international best-selling author, and she was a palliative care nurse. And she would interview people before they were about to die. They were of sound mind. What were their top regrets? And I think the top regret, I always butcher this, was I wish I lived the life that I wanted to live, not the life I thought others wanted me to live.
Oh.
And everyone, so especially with your show, everyone will resonate with it as well. But also that feeling like living your own path is like the hardest challenge in this world. There's so many things that can pull us away. And so the thing that inspires me most in the world is when I see people like you who live their path. It's never easy, but it's also, in my mind, much harder not to live your life in the long term, because you don't want to live a life full of regrets and all, I could have done this, or the what ifs. And so I find it really courageous. I forgot what my question was, but I think you would enjoy her book as well, even though I feel like you've already mastered it as well. But it's a great read.
I mean, I'm always learning. I'm never gonna have the hubris to think I figured it all out.
I like that as well. There's very little, we all have ego, but very little ego with you. But back with the intuition, I would imagine, as a young artist as well, that, heaps of highs and lows. But when we follow our intuition, it's always a lot easier. But when we're younger, we don't always necessarily follow our intuition. So now that actually developing a strong relationship with intuition, have you seen in your life when you haven't followed your intuition and how things maybe haven't necessarily gone to plan and, the lessons there as well? Bit loaded, but we'll see what comes.
No, absolutely. And this is where I really resonate with Elizabeth Gilbert's work is that she and Martha Beck, they talk about how if you are straying from the path, you will feel this sense of bodily anxiety, and it won't really go away until you pay attention to that. And in a way, it's a safety system. It's an alarm system to tell you that you're not going the right way.
Yeah.
So there have been times in my life where I'm someone who struggles with anxiety and depression, and I have a lot of tools now to the point where I feel very supported, and I'm fortunate to have gone through the longest stretch I've ever gone through of consistent peace.
Oh, good for
But
you.
I'm not immune to it, and it's actually a good thing because there are so many things that happen in life that are going to push you this way or that way, and like there's a difference between your own nature and what your nature wants to do and what culture wants you to do.
Yeah.
And we're seeing it in our political climate and the ways in which these like young men are becoming MAGA enthusiasts because they're so lonely and they just want a sense of community to be involved in. But it's what that is like there's like a desperation for connection, but it's so misguided, you know? And so like my version of that is if I'm in a situation, if I'm in a relationship or if I'm in a job or something where that's not aligned with what I truly believe or want to do, then I'll just feel horribly anxious. That's like the first thing that will pop up. And the more if I don't listen to that, then I'm only going to sink further into this like woods of feeling like I'm very lost. So it's almost like I have to pay attention to it. And even though it's painful, like disappointing other people, it's always pointed me in the right direction. So I would recommend The Way of Integrity for more about that, but that's kind of the compass that I live by.
Great word. I see it as an inner compass as well, and it's like a guiding light. Every time I follow it, life is much, not, I wouldn't say necessarily easier, but it's easier in the long term. And when I haven't
Yeah.
followed it, it's been horrible. Like very long story short, I thought I had to be an accountant, so I worked as an accountant, and I went completely against my intuition, and
Oh my
I just
God,
became.
that's so common. Yeah.
Yeah, I know, but I'm very grateful for the experience and what I learned. It was like loading on steroids. Still got much learning to do, and I was so
Yes.
numb because I always had comedy aspirations, then which led to
Yeah.
writing, which led to this, and I was just like, what's the word? I was numb. I was like a shell of myself, and eventually I got out of it and followed my intuition, and my life has been much, much better, much happier, and I've got a lot of tools through that experience, and now, yeah, life's certainly a lot better living and
Well, it's
not.
very clear how passionate you are about doing this. So I'm happy that you found the path.
Thank you. Living an authentic life, or at least for me, I can only really speak about me, is a game changer. Like I see life completely differently. It's like the sky's more blue, and I'm not saying that I live in like happy land. Like all my senses are heightened. And then when I follow my intuition, for example, and this is probably a topic that we could speak about for 200 hours, when I'm like at my, I don't even know what the right word is, but equilibrium or in my center, that's when I'm more like receptive to ideas. And like, for example,
Hmm.
going against intuition. Recently I was meditating and I got an idea for another movie. And I'm just like so obsessed with writing this movie, but I haven't been able to put pen to paper on the actual script. I've been making notes, and I feel like the longer I'm taking to write, like I'm moving away from it. And you talked about, I think the what was the right word, but like an alarm system when you move away from it. So it's good awareness
Hmm.
for me that that's actually a good signal in your body to then follow your path because it guides us in the right light. So
Absolutely. That's really cool to hear. I'm glad you got out of accounting.
same. And I want to talk, this also comes under the guise of intuition. You've spoken about many different bands, and once again, we could speak about this for a while, but like, for example, with, please correct my pronunciation of it. Is it San Fermin? Fermin?
San Fermin. Yeah.
Fermin. Thank you.
Yeah.
You join that, which is like crazy. I think you become the lead singer. You do that for, I think, 5 or so years. Correct me if I'm wrong.
Yep.
And then you leave. I always love hearing about when you have the courage to leave, because you're also a solo artist, and then you're also working in a team, and sometimes they can counterbalance each other, and you still want to be true to yourself and work on your stuff, but then you also want to be loyal to the band. So did you follow your intuition in that regard, where you're like, it's time to leave?
Yeah, I just knew that I didn't want to be singing someone else's songs anymore. And in that particular band, I was a hired singer. It wasn't my creative project.
Yep.
It was
They
a
existed
collaboration
before. Yeah.
it was a collaboration of a bunch of wonderful musicians, including my friend Ellis, who wrote all the music. And I just knew that I wanted to be my own artist again. And that band came along at a time when I really was feeling discouraged about my own work, and I missed performing, but I also wasn't sure like what the future looked like for my own singer-songwriter career. So when this came around and it was like, here, like you can tour the world and you won't have to be responsible for any of the finances and or even how well the record does. Like you can just hang out with cool people and like play this really great music. I was like 100%. This is something that really interests me.
Yeah.
And it kind of saved me. It like really nourished my love for music and made me a much better performer, because at that time I had never really performed without a guitar, and here I was like hired just to sing. So I had to learn how to like express myself with my body in a way that I didn't before. And I watched those early videos and I just cringed because I was so nervous. But fast forward 5 years and like I'm like crawling around on the floor and like crowd surfing and stuff. And so it taught me so much, and we're all still really close. So it just goes to show that even if you think that you're like disappointing somebody by doing something that they might not want in the moment, it doesn't benefit anyone to be dishonest and
Right.
stay and then let resentment bubble up. And in that way, like I was nervous, of course, to tell him, I think that this is going to be my last touring cycle with you guys. But he was so generous and supportive, and I think because it was direct and transparent, it
Yeah. Not by
wasn't
text
a
or
hurtful thing.
like one word
No.
answers. Yeah.
Yeah. But I have so many fond memories of being in that band. It was like the perfect band to be in my 20s, when everyone was like just figuring it out. And there were a lot of people in that band too. There were 8 of us.
Oh, I didn't
So
realize.
that's a lot of stories in the Sprinter to tell every single day when we're driving to our next gig.
I didn't bring it up as terms of like a gossip thing. I think it's so cool how, the lessons that you've learned, you became a better performer. You learned so much about yourself, working with the great team, and obviously you still have love for them. But also, we've talked about authenticity, integrity, and intuition, of how like in the short term, as I said, can be very painful, but in the long term, it's better for everyone. It's better for the band. It's better for you, because if you're not 100% committed, it can come across, even though I'm sure you were top professional and you had a great time, but in the long term, you want everyone to be on the same page. And so
Yeah.
there's a courage there to, first of all, okay, I'm saying a lot, but you're at a point in your life where you weren't necessarily, you said feeling your best in terms of this, in terms of like the career. Then you join them and it, reignite something within yourself. You then like learn that amazing lesson and you then bring it into your solo career. I think that's so cool in the journey there. So many lessons, and I'm sure there was a lot of pain as well. But do you ever like look back and go like, oh, this was such a blessing, not only the people I met, but this is what it did for myself. And I'm so glad it came at that point in my life.
Oh yeah, everything. Every single little thing. Like I feel very grateful for all of the weird twists and turns that have happened and that are still happening.
Oh, that's nice. And last question on that. How did you find the balance of being in a group and also being solo? Because, you know, you have to like perform with the band, be with the band, but then you're also potentially writing your own stuff and you've got a voice in two different regards. Was that a,
It was hard, and that was part of the reason that I felt that it was time for me to devote more of my energy towards my solo stuff because it's a great thing that that band was successful, and also it didn't leave room for much else.
yeah. Okay, I reckon what we're going to do to wrap up the podcast is to do a rapid fire segment. So the first thing that springs to mind, but please take your time to think about it. What's been your special ingredient to work all these years?
What special ingredient to work?
Yeah.
What do you mean?
Like what's kept you going all these years? What's that special, you know, secret sauce that gets you going for the
Mm. I think that there's a sense of playfulness that if I don't have, then am not as interested in that kind of work that is either 100% earnest or 100% irreverent. I think that there has to be a little bit of there has to be depth and lightness for me. So yeah, keeping it light and also meaningful, like not being too attached to the outcome of a project and just allowing yourself to live in the moment. It's one of the hardest things to do, but I think trying to just take it second by second.
I'm not going to comment on them, but that was great. Because I'll derail them. What brings the best creative content out of you?
Um, what brings the best creative content out? I mean, a lot of things, but something that comes to mind is going and seeing other art that you like, and it doesn't have to be within your field. So whether that be visiting a museum or like seeing a movie or going to, I don't know, a rock sculpture garden in a totally different city for a day or something. Like I always find that the best artists have such a deep interest in other kinds of art, and then it influences your art in a way that you wouldn't have expected it to.
Yeah. What's your favorite thing to do when you're not working? It could be what you just said as well.
My favorite thing to do when I'm not working is watching the Great British Bake Off on my couch with my cat.
Is it because you can play so many different instruments? Is there like this one instrument where you like have never been able to master it and it's like the bane to your existence?
Uh, I want to learn how to play the theremin.
The,
You know what that is?
no.
It's an instrument that has an electronic antenna, and then you
Okay.
have a glove, or you can actually just use your hand, and it emits sound based on how close you get to it. So you can play it like a physical, um,
Wow.
like I don't know. You look it up. That's something that I'd like to learn and get better at.
That's wild to me. That's so cool. What are you most proud of?
Ooh, gosh, that's so broad. I don't know.
It's a hard one.
I think at this juncture in my life, I'm really proud of Tiger Daughter. I'm really proud of the show that I've created that feels like it's got elements of all of the aspects of my career. And I think it is a real showcase of who I am and the things that I care about, my sense of humor and the people that I love. One of the most challenging relationships in my whole life. And yeah, I think it's a love letter to music, it's a love letter to my mom, it's a love letter to my own sense of like, I'm just gonna do this and let's see what happens, I guess. Like, I feel like I unlocked a lot about who I am as an artist and a person when I did that show,
That's
when I
so
created
cool.
that show.
That's amazing. The artist in me is like, oh, and the human in me is also like this. That's so. What would you do if you knew you could not fail?
Ooh. I want to write a movie and I also want to write a musical. That's a little bit like of a longer term project, and I've never done that before, but I have some specific ideas for like sort of like a magical realism movie that I think I feel intimidated by because I've never approached that art form. But I think it's gonna be that's gonna be my next project.
That's so exciting, and I hear the intimidation. Throw it away. You can do it. I'm
Thank
excited for
you.
it.
Thanks.
Given everything that you've been able to achieve, I think this will be a walk in the park. Last two. Any advice, you kind of answered this, but any advice you want to give to people who want to try something different or new, but perhaps a bit fearful of doing so?
Yeah, just do it. Like it's gonna be cringe and embarrassing for only a little bit, but then the more you do it, the more you will discover little like things about how only you can do that. And if I could be any sort of like example for someone who's discovered things, quote unquote, later in life, it's been so rewarding and interesting. Like, if anything, it's not boring. So take that risk and just see what happens.
Amazing. Off air, you're not on the spot. Do I have time for two more? If not, wrap it up now. It's all good.
Yeah,
Not
yeah,
on.
go for it.
Thank you. Much appreciated. That'll be all cut out. We're back on. If you could go back into a time when you were first starting out, what advice would you give yourself and why?
Oh, it's so hard because I don't think I could have done anything different when I was starting out with music. I just wanted to be cool so badly. And I guess I would say just throw out the this desire to be cool because you're never there's in the words of Ben Folds, there's always going to be someone cooler than you. And it's so transient what people think is in and what's not. So just excite yourself. Make sure make yourself laugh, make yourself delighted. And that is how you're going to find your people because you're not going to be having that front of like mystery and inauthenticity. Like just embrace your fart jokes, be a nerd. It's fine.
I love that on so many levels. Last question before I ask how people can follow you and keep up to date with you. What is the one question I should have asked you?
Um, you could have asked me how my cat's doing, and he's doing great. He's right here.
Oh, that's very cute. Hello, what's your cat's
Say
name?
hi. His name is Albus Dumbledore. I know, I'm such a Harry Potter millennial.
Oh, that's so funny. How's your cat doing?
He's doing great. He's doing great. He's just
Amazing.
cleaning himself.
Anything else or
Nope, I think we got it. Thank you so much for all of your thoughtfulness and your research. It really makes such a difference. I appreciate
well,
it.
thank you for one, your authenticity and living, your best life. It's been a joy. Before we wrap it up, how can people follow you and keep up to date with you?
The easiest way is on Instagram. You can find me at Charlene with a C, Kaye.
Cool. I'll put that in the episode notes below and some tour dates as well. Thank you so much. This was a joy. Really appreciate
Thank
it.
you,
And thank you for
Michael.
introducing Albert Dumbledore.
Albus.
Albus.
Yes.
Yeah,
Thank you
brilliant.
so much for your time and thank you for all that you do for artists. It makes me really happy.
I love how Charlene talks about wanting to be cool. That is, being someone or something else. She encourages us to make ourselves laugh and make ourselves delighted, and that's where we meet our people and become an authentic person, part of our tribe. Further, she's all about authenticity and being our best self. Charlene persuades us to start that new thing. Yes, she says it may be cringe and embarrassing, but the process of discovery is worth it because you'll find your way and realize you are the only one who can do it in your own unique way. The rewards are plentiful. So I'll leave you with this epic quote. Authenticity is the daily practice of letting go of who we think we're supposed to be and embracing who we are. Brené Brown. Thank you for listening to the Funny and Failure podcast, exploring the deeper side of comedy.